Right. Okay, we've got him there. We're just going to link up with David Seymour. You know what? I was looking back over some of the ACT leaders that we've had over the years. And, John Banksy, Rodney Hyde, Don Brash, Roger Douglas. Some very interesting people have been leaders of ACT in 25 years. But the current leader is David Seymour. And he joins us now. David, good morning. Thank you for joining us. Congratulations.
Hey, good morning, Sean.
Congratulations on 25 years.
Yeah, who'd have thunk? It's the longest running third party in New Zealand. In spite of everything, people have stuck together because they think freedom works ultimately.
What about the Greens? Don't they outlast you?
No, they entered Parliament as part of a sort of devil beast within the alliance. And then, of course, the alliance...
Oh, you're being technical now. I think they are older than you.
No, they were part of the alliance, and of course that fell apart. It wasn't really much of an alliance at all, so they fell out of that. But that didn't happen until 1999. Okay,
well, take us back to, 1994 you were founded. And really, I guess, I think of ACT as a place where the neoliberals of the Labour Party went to continue their crusade. Would that be a fair summation of the foundation of ACT?
Yeah, I think that's fair, but let me ask you another question. Where did the neoliberals of the Labour Party come from? There's always been a strand of people in New Zealand, and I won't go the whole thing, but you can trace it at least back to the 1920s. There's always been a group of people who believe in freedom, who don't want to follow the crowd and see New Zealand as a pioneering society where people have individual rights and freedoms. And ACT is, I think, the political wing of that. Of course, there's other organisations, and in some ways, I would say the platform.
Let's get him back. So, David, what were you doing mentioning the platform in the same sentence as ACT?
Well, I think there's an element of both that are countercultural, the common culture today in the mainstream media and mainstream political parties is the idea that it's not what you do but who you are that counts, that you should think more about whether you're creating offence than what the right answer is. And those kinds of thoughts, I think, are corrosive to New Zealand in the long term.
All right, let's go back to the start then. Has the party, do you think, changed? And I look at your website now, I think online it says ACT New Zealand for Freedom. Is that a different message than was being pumped 25 years ago when the party was formed? Have you evolved?
This is a great question. I think, first of all, you've got to bear in mind, I was informed too when the party entered Parliament, so I'm not always the best commentator on this stuff. I was in Standard 4 when the party was first formed. Look, I think if you look at what Roger and Richard and Rodney and others were talking about in the early days, it was about giving people the right to take their share of the education budget and spend it at a school that they saw fit, and that was because they get better results. It was because disadvantaged kids, especially Maori and Pacific kids, would get better results that way, and it was because it would take away the political agenda that is often driven through a one-size-fits-all education system. Now, you look at 25 years later, charter schools are still a flagship ACT policy. So, no, I'm not sure that it has changed that much. There's some common threads. I'm sure people can point to things that are different, people who are around longer and know more than I do about the history of the thing, but those are the things I see that are common.
One thing that has changed, and under your leadership, and hat tip to you, you have more MPs than you have ever had before. But I guess the irony is you have that much larger caucus at a time when, unusually under MMP, you have a government on the other side of the political spectrum that has an absolute majority. So those 9 MPs under the current circumstances don't have the sort of sway or the sort of influence or the sort of ability to change policy that they might have had under a normal MMP scenario.
Well, I think that's true, but I mean, water does always run downhill in the end, and you can't stop the gravity of New Zealand politics, that people want change. They don't like excessive power, and eventually they pull them back down to earth. So I would say that in the next year, the chances of a change in government are very high, and the chances that it will be a two-party government where ACT is an indispensable partner and a sizable partner are also very high. All of that is possible only because we've built, as you say, the biggest caucus that we've had to date. And on the current polls, it will get still bigger if there was an election held. So, that's where we're headed. And the question for me is not, will the government change? We've got to fight and campaign like we have to change it. The question is, will we be prepared for the change? And I say we've got to prepare as if we're definitely going to win, because there's two ways to win an election. One is you don't get enough votes. A lot of people lose elections that way. But you can also lose an election by getting more votes than having no clue what to do. And so we're very focused on making sure that we don't know what to do.
Okay. Do you think the core membership of the party has changed in 25 years? And I'll be brutally frank, if you look at your leaders, they're kind of older white guys. And I'm sure all your critics say that you're just a bunch of stale pale males. I mean, Don Brash, John Banks, Rodney to a certain extent, and Roger Douglas. Who are ACT supporters, and do they reflect what has been a pretty same leadership over the years?
Well, first of all, I mean, it's incredible that you can say someone's stale, male, pale. I mean, it's...
I'm not... it's what other people would call you. Forgive me.
Yeah, ageism. Yeah, no, I'm not. I'm just saying is that, I mean, you're right to say that people would say that. It's ageism, it's sexism, it's racism, all in one phrase, and yet people think that's okay, and it's all usually the same people that would jump up and down with offence at anything. So look, that's a real shame. In terms of, who's been the leaders of ACT, yep, I mean, you're right that, they've all been from one gender, and they've all been, with the exception of me being part Maori, they've all been white guys. So look, I mean, that's certainly true. But I think it's also true that they've been the only people in Parliament that have consistently stood up for personal freedom and personal responsibility. So, on the other hand, if you didn't have them, Parliament would have less diversity of thought. And I think that having someone to stand up for those values that have actually contributed to so much of New Zealand's success is worth it. Would it be better if there happened to be a wider range of people demographically? Well, I think if you look at ACT's conference on Sunday, let's do the numbers there. If you counted the MC, your old colleague Leah Panapa, we had, I think, 4 of the 7 people on stage were Maori women.
Yeah, okay. And what would you say of the membership? Well, you're not going to give me any idea of your membership figures, are you? Go on.
Look, you're not going to get a party, but it's certainly higher than it's been in 20 years. That's for sure. And
paint me a picture of the average ACT party member.
Well, I would say, people talk about demographics. I'll talk to you about psychographics. It's not so much, people always want to categorise humans by their race and gender and all the rest. I would say it's a state of mind issue. People that support ACT fundamentally believe that they can make a difference in their own lives and the lives of those they care about. They don't want to be fodder for politicians and their grand government schemes. They're inherently sceptical of government. I always laugh. I look at the net approval ratings of party leaders by each party voter. So ACT party voters, actually about 20% of them disapprove of me. I think that's not so good. But then I look at the ACT party voters have by far the most negative approval ratings for every single party leader. About 90% of them disapprove of Ardern. Something like 60 or 70% disapprove of Luxon. So I'm just the one they're the least sceptical about. So the ACT people are sceptical about government, but they're very positive about what New Zealanders can do in their lives to actually make a difference and help people. I think they basically say that putting a hand in someone in your own pocket is true kindness, whereas our opponents think that it's kind to put your hand in someone else's pocket.
I do want to talk about age, though. No political party can survive unless it revitalises, unless it appeals to young people who are becoming politically aware. It has always struck me that ACT does have a certain following, particularly amongst our universities, and amongst those who might be weary of the political correctness and social justice warriorism that affects the undergraduate common rooms of our tertiary institutions. Do you feel that you are attracting younger New Zealanders to ACT's philosophy?
Yeah, I mean, I look at the social media following that I have. For most platforms, if you look at Instagram or Facebook, the top three are Jacinda Ardern, Chloe Swarbrick, and me. Now, of course, not everyone on social media is young, but you don't do well unless you have that following. So, I would say that, we've got a certain resonance there. We always get a good response at schools. I mean, the weekend I got invited to a house party of about 150 people who had a band playing there in their early 20s. And it was a tremendous night, a tremendous event. And, I look at what's happening in our country. Younger people have a lot more interest in it than older people, not because better people or care more or anything. It's just simple mathematics. They're going to be paying the COVID debt longer because they'll be around paying tax for longer. They're going to be affected by the trends in education that are sort of gradually bombing us back to the Stone Age, one generation at a time. They'll be affected by that for longer. And I think, young people on average tend to be a bit more philosophical.
Yeah.
So, that also means, I think that's always meant that a party like ACT that comes along with big ideas, like maybe the state is doing too much, maybe the state's not always good, that's slightly provocative. Whereas if you look at some of our competitors, whatever line their focus groups told them to use is not always that appealing.
There is one tradition, well, no, I wouldn't call it a tradition. Rodney Hyde and you both did Dancing with the Stars. Now, he famously dropped his dance partner and you twerked. How much do you think twerking has done for your political career and profile and ACT's?
Well, I mean, we've never done any research into that. We've saved our money on that, but just based on what people tell me, I mean, I think people want to know that their political leaders are real and they can touch them and that they're not, or they don't think that they're anointed godly beings. I think that's part of the issue. People don't want, for example, their pipes to be managed in a faraway city. They want to be close to the action and treated with dignity. And I think when you've got a politician who is actually prepared to do stuff that some would find demeaning, then I think that helps remind people that you're the kind of person who actually will go and talk to people. And look, this week, I'm doing 12, I think, public meetings. I'm going to Napier tonight. Altogether, we're doing public meetings from Whangarei to Invercargill over the next 2 weeks. So, in a way, the dancing, the twerking, whatever, it shows that you don't take yourself too seriously and you're actually prepared to go and listen to people and have a good time. And, that's what we're doing over the next 2 weeks, actually.
David, the other thing I would say, and that has been observed by many in this Parliament since the last election, that any small party that has relative newbies coming into Parliament is at great risk of someone putting a foot wrong, stepping out of line, and the scandal that destroys credibility. It has been, I must say, as someone who's watched these things for a while, quite remarkable the level of basically non-stuff uppedness that has occurred in ACT since the 2020 election. And I understand that you have an administrative system where rather than give each individual MP their own budget, their own staff, you've essentially pulled everyone together in a group. How important do you think that has been in avoiding some of the pitfalls that smaller parties face when they grow?
Well, first of all, I got to give credit to the individuals. I mean, you think about someone like, say, I don't know, Mark Cameron. I mean, when he was made number 8 on the ACT Party list, we were polling under 3%. So he would have been sitting there saying, look, we're absolutely fine. In fact, I've got it good on good authority. He said to his cows, don't worry, girls, I'll be back. It's just going to go and do a bit of campaigning to help ACT in the country. He became an MP. He had to say goodbye to his cows, get a farm manager in, and he's taken to it with aplomb. And I could tell similar stories about most of our MPs. They were just sold to the earth people, signed up to help because they didn't like the way the country was going, got made MPs and kept making the most of it. But it's also true that we've really tried our best to create a new culture, because we had an opportunity with a blank slate, whereas other parties are dealing with years and years and years of resentment and problems and cultural malaise. We had a blank slate, and basically every MP gets a certain amount of funding, and they basically get an office and they can hire a couple of assistants, and what they do is they create their own little fiefdoms, and then they go off and go to war against other MPs, and often the MPs that they find closest by MPs from the same party as them, so they go to war with each other, and that ends up being politics. What we did is we said we're not doing any of that. So on the first day, we all signed up that we were going to take each of our individual budgets, put them in one big pool, and then manage our resources, our staff, our bus, all of the things that we could afford to get to run our offices. We manage those in what we call the Caucus Support Centre.
Sounds kind of socialist, David.
Well, but here's the thing, businesses are socialist in a way. I mean, customers and investors and entrepreneurs and workers, they all get together and pool their resources to achieve something together they couldn't achieve alone. We don't mind if it's a business, because businesses are voluntary, and so is the ACT Party. It's when the government forces you to pull your resources against your will that it's a problem. All
right. At the moment, as you say, the tide is going out for Labor. The pendulum is swinging back towards the centre. But it seems as the National Party's fortunes increase, yours suffer somewhat, that it is actually maybe a redistribution of the centre-right pie that is going on, or that is the danger for you. How do you counter that? How does ACT become its own thing rather than a component of that side of the political spectrum?
Well, I think it has. I mean, I suppose a couple of points. So people say, look, last December you got up to 18, 19%, which we did, and it was phenomenal. On the other hand, now, ACT's polling around 10%, some polls lower, but the last 2 or 3 of us at 10%. Now, a couple of things about that. One is I don't think that the sort of 8% of people that used to vote said they'd vote to us in December and aren't now. I don't think they hate us. I don't think that they've gone away because there's been some scandal or we've done some crazy thing. I mean, I think basically they're still open to ACT and they're still warm to ACT. They're just not saying they're going to vote for us right now. So I think that potential's still there. Second thing is, despite all of that, there's 10% who are still saying that they want to vote for ACT, and I think that's quite phenomenal. And I'm not just I think it's phenomenal. I mean, compared with ACT or any other third party halfway between an election, it is phenomenal. So it puts ACT in a very good place, A, to have a lot of power if the government changes, and B, to grow even more and regain some of that December polling high before the election. So, yeah, I mean, people want to paint the picture, it's all bad and we're going down and all the rest, but I just say, hang on a minute. You know, if I'd told you 2 years ago I had to be polling 10%, you would never have believed me. Now we are, and people say this is all hopeless, why don't you poll 20?
Okay, final question, because I think there are a growing number of people who don't want to vote Labor and aren't going to be scared on tax issues into voting Labor because they're worried about the Greens. I guess the question for many is, what's the difference between ACT and National?
Well, let me give you 2 examples. This Zero Carbon Act is totally nuts. We already have our emissions capped in the ETS, so all of that bureaucracy and central planning and ordering people round makes no difference to the climate. It does make a difference to people's freedom and prosperity. The National Party, hook, line and sinker, have signed up to it. ACT's the only party that opposes it. In government, we'll be fighting to dump the thing. When it comes to the recent housing accord, which basically says you can build 3 3-storey houses on any residential property in the country, it's totally nuts. It won't lead to more houses being built. The real constraints on the pace of building homes is builders and materials and infrastructure from the council. Those are the problems we need to solve if we want to build houses faster. This rule just means that the same houses will be built in different places, and you can get a 3-storey home right next door with no design standards, a floor-to-ceiling window on the 3rd floor looking into your kid's bedroom, and there's nothing you can do about it under this law. Now, the law comes into effect in a couple of months. National signed up to it. ACT was the only party that opposed it because it's not good policy, not because we thought it would be popular or unpopular, because it's not good policy, so we opposed it. So I think those are 2 examples of where ACT behaves quite differently from National. We look at, is this policy actually good? Will it make people's lives better? And if not, we've opposed it, whereas in both those instances, the National Party voted with Labor.
David Seymour, happy 25th birthday, a couple of days belated, and good luck in Napier tonight. I thank you for your time this morning.
No worries. Thank you, Sean.
Cheers. That is David Seymour, and I figured, what's David? He's around 38 if he was in Form 2 25 years ago when the ACT Party was formed. Still not quite a young thruster anymore. He's getting to middle age, isn't he?